Hello, I'm Tim Smith with the Adams County Historical Society. And I thought today I'd talk a little bit about the shoe factory in Gettysburg. You know, along with maybe the horse's hooves and the idea that General Buford's men had repeating rifles on July 1st, the shoe factory is probably the greatest myth surrounding the Battle of Gettysburg. And the story actually originates from General Henry Heath's official report of the battle, where he's explaining the details of how it was his division that brought on the fighting on July 1st, 1863. And basically, his unit arrived in Cashtown on June 29th, west of the town of Gettysburg. And he describes in his official report, on the morning of June 30th, I ordered Brigadier General Pettigrew to take his brigade to Gettysburg, search the town for army supplies, shoes especially. General Pettigrew found a large force of cavalry near the town, supported by an infantry force. And then he explains how Pettigrew decided not to enter the town, returned, and then he discussed the situation that night with General A.P. Hill, who was in charge of the 3rd Army Corps. It's interesting when you read General Hill's official report, Ambrose Powell Hill, who's the commander of the Confederate 3rd Army Corps. On arriving at Cashtown, General Heath, who had sent forward Pettigrew's brigade to Gettysburg, reported that Pettigrew had encountered the enemy at Gettysburg, principally cavalry, but in what force he could not determine. A courier was then dispatched with this information to the general commanding with orders to start Anderson's division early. Also to Ewell, informing him that I intended to advance the next morning and discover what was in my front. And according to Robert E. Lee, in a letter to Jefferson Davis written on July 4th, 1863, soon after intelligence was received that the Army of the Potomac under General Hooker was advancing, our whole force was directed to concentrate at Gettysburg. And you get this idea that when General Heath advanced to Gettysburg on June 30th and discovered Pettigrew's brigade discovered the enemy there, that the next morning they were advancing on Gettysburg to sort of see what was in their front and, develop the situation or make a reconnaissance. But in the post-war writings of General Heath, he really doubles down on this shoe stuff. In 1877, in a letter he wrote, I am confident that the Battle of Gettysburg was a result purely of an accident for which I am probably more than anyone else accountable. And he also mentions in this article, hearing that a supply of shoes was to be obtained in Gettysburg, 8 miles distant from Cashtown, and greatly needing shoes for my men, I directed General Pettigrew to go to Gettysburg and get these supplies. On June 30th, General Johnston Pettigrew, with his brigade, went near Gettysburg but did not enter the town, returning the same evening to Cashtown, reporting that he had not carried out my orders as Gettysburg was occupied by enemy cavalry, and that some of his officers reported hearing drums beating on the farther side of town, that under these circumstances, he did not deem it advisable to enter Gettysburg. About that time, General Hill rode up, and this information was given to him. He remarked, the only force at Gettysburg is cavalry, probably a detachment of observation. I am just from General Lee, and the information he has from his scouts corroborates what I received from mine. I then said, if there's no objections, I will take my division tomorrow and go to Gettysburg and get those shoes. Hill replied, none in the world. And of course, none of this actually seems to be corroborated by the official reports. In Heath's memoirs, which were published much later, the wording is slightly different. He mentions he had heard of a large supply of shoes that were stored at Gettysburg, and in the morning of June 30th, he ordered Pettigrew there. And then in his conversation with Hill, he says, if there is no objection, I will march tomorrow, go to Gettysburg, and secure these shoes. Hill replied, do so. So I think I like none in the world better. So they're kind of like really two issues. One of them is that does Heath really believe that the Battle of Gettysburg was caused because he heard there were shoes in Gettysburg? Did he actually know there were shoes in Gettysburg? Is there a shoe factory in Gettysburg? Is there a supply of shoes? Absolutely not. There is no shoe factory in Gettysburg. Gettysburg has cobblers like every other town. There's even an advertisement in an 1830s newspaper that mentions a shoe factory, but the term is being used to describe a small shoe shop and not a large factory. And there's really no reason to believe that Heath received a report that there was a supply of shoes there. The shoe thing seems he really leans into after the war. And all this ignores the fact that Lee had ordered for the concentration of his army at Gettysburg, and Heath's moving to Gettysburg on July 1st to see what force is there because the entire Southern Army is moving on that town. One last thing, there's a really, in 1965, there's a book on the battle called Here Come the Rebels by Wilbur Nye. You know, Wilbur Nye, the Civil War guy. And in the book, he mentions on June 26th, when Juba Early's division arrives in Gettysburg prior to the battle, he assembled Burgermeister Kendallhart and his council and demanded they fill a requisition for money, rations, and other supplies. When they professed their inability to comply, he had the town searched. Very little was turned up, but Early did notice a shoe factory in the village and sent word of it to the rear. Thus, some think, bringing on the Battle of Gettysburg. And he actually has a footnote for this information, you know, and forget about the fact that we don't have a burgomaster in our town. That term is definitely not used. And it's footnote 21 in his book on chapter 16. And I should mention that the first thing I noticed about it, there is no footnote. There's no source for this information. But the footnote says, A.P. Hill's leading brigade reached the outskirts of Gettysburg on June 30th in search of the shoes reported by Early. Their encounter on that day with some of Buford's scouts caused major elements of both sides to resume their march towards Gettysburg early on the 31st, and is popularly believed to have brought on the Battle of Gettysburg. Wow. You know, I've never studied the events that occurred on June 31st, 1863. Perhaps because there is no June 31st. Remember, if you like all the content we put on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe.